very... Okay. Good evening, and a very warm welcome to the audience here and those joining us via YouTube to the Future Roads Debate. My name is Lucius Soibelman. I'm a professor at the Viterbi School of Engineering at the University of Southern California, USC, and a member of the Future Roads Program Steering Committee. The format for tonight's debate is as follows. There are 3 speakers on each team, each being allocated 7 minutes. For the speakers of both teams, you may address the speakers of the other team during their speech. For points of information, you need to clearly shout on that point or point of information. The speaker can then choose whether or not to take this up. Please respect their choice. Please note that no points of information may be raised during the first and last minute of speaker's time, and no points of information will be taken from the audience. After the first 4 speakers will be an open floor discussion for around 20 minutes. During this time, anyone is welcome to add their own points in support or in opposition to the motion, or indeed of abstention. Please make sure that you do not address any of the speakers personally, only their arguments. When voting, please consider who you felt delivered the most persuasive argument this evening. For those not familiar with voting, you vote with your feet as you leave the room through the eyes and nose door in the rear of the chamber. Please note that we will be recording and live streaming the debate. Photos will be taken by the organizers. Please refrain from using flash photography during the debate. There is no fire alarm test planned. If alarm goes off, run for your lives. Please follow the fire exit directions to the lawn in front of the building. A final note to the speakers. Shishen Han will be acting as the debate secretary and timekeeper, and will warn you when you have 1 minute left and then when you are out of time. Now moving to the motion of the debate for this night. Future roads. This House believes roads should be designed for extreme climate events, no normal weather. I'd like now to present to you the speaking members of each team. It's not an easy task being a speaker for the debate, so please show your support to them. In proposition, Dr. Oliver Thomas, Innovation Manager of Colas UK. Dr. Chapa Hewa Pelendage, MSCA Future Roads Fellow, Department of Engineering. Professor Dr. Peck, Director of Innovation, AtkinsRéalis. In opposition, John Armitage, Technical Director of Ramboll UK, William Waller, Senior Director of Arcadis, and Paul Campion, CEO of TRL. So let's start the first speaker, Dr. Oliver Thomas. Oliver Thomas is an innovation manager working for Colas Ltd, who designs, constructs, and maintains sustainable highways transport infrastructure, focusing on strategic and collaborative innovation projects. His current portfolio covers material development and demonstration, operational safety technology, resilience and decarbonization, deployable artificial intelligence, and automating highways works vehicles. Oliver, the floor is yours.
Mr. Chair, members of the House, honoured guests, and my wife, who has joined on YouTube to see if I can keep to time. Before we start debating engineering, economics, or policy, I'd like to start with something we can hopefully all agree on. I have heard it said that a road is never just a road. It's the thread that holds a community together. When it breaks, everything unravels. We have all watched that thread pulled tighter and tighter by a climate that is no longer gentle, predictable, or stable. We have seen roads washed away as if they were chalk lines on a pavement. Heat waves buckle asphalt like soft wax, and entire regions cut off. Not because engineers failed their responsibilities, but because the climate changed faster than our expectations and standards. So before we look for answers, I believe that we first need to ask ourselves, and those who will rely on our decisions in the future, two questions. Is the current state of the climate what we thought it would be 20 years ago? And if we could have our time again, is there honestly nothing we could have done differently? Today's debate is therefore not about the romance of infrastructure, nor about hypothetical weather extremes that sit buried in the footnotes of design manuals. It's about what kind of future we choose to build and maintain, and whether our roads, the very connectors of society, remain ready for it. The words normal weather once meant something. They meant seasons, patterns, predictability. But we stand here in a world where communities experience not anomalies, but a new reality. A month's rainfalls in a single afternoon. Heat waves break national records year after year. Storms labelled once in a century return within a year, sometimes within a season. But the consequences and impacts of these when they occur with increasing frequency and severity are very predictable. Disrupted travel, severed supply chains, flooded homes, emergency services struggling to reach those in danger. Our road network, modern, impressive, essential, was largely built for a climate that simply no longer exists. And each year, the mismatch between what roads were designed for and what they must endure grows wider. I can say with certainty that the future is already here. The motion is not a call for extravagance, just a new baseline for events that are already upon us. It is not a demand for mythical, indestructible highways. After the floods, you may see rainbows, but no unicorns. And it is certainly not an accusation against the hard-working men and women who build and maintain our network that I'm proud to work alongside. This motion instead comes back to one simple question. Should we design and maintain the roads of the future for the weather we wish we had, or the weather we actually have? In other words, what future do we think we're preparing for? Because normal weather has become a fallacy that we reassure ourselves with, a story that becomes less true each passing year. This debate matters because the stakes are not abstract. They are lived daily by millions across the country. Let me reflect a moment on what happens when a road fails, not a pothole or inconvenient planned closure, but a major failure during an increasingly frequent and severe climate event. An ambulance diverted, a grandparent and their entire lifeline cut off, deliveries of vital supplies stalled, businesses closed for days, weeks, sometimes months. As well as livelihoods, for some, it's a real matter of life and death, which drives to the core of what we were willing to take, of what we are willing to tolerate as a society, not just for ourselves and our loved ones, but for everyone. Because for those working in the sector who can see a different path, a road failure is a human failure, one that we can no longer be in denial about. I was encouraged by colleagues to make this personal about what it meant to those closest to me. My daughter was born in an inflatable birthing pool in a house on Hertford Street, just a few roads away from here. That was nearly 14 years ago, and it already feels like a different universe. We narrowly avoided creating a biblical flood in our living room that day. But the anxiety she feels about our future on this planet and her place in it are very real and cannot be argued with, as anybody with a teenage daughter will confirm. And this takes us to the challenge, the crossroads we stand at between two philosophies, to design for the past or to design for the only future that awaits us and our offspring. Which choice better reflects our responsibility as engineers, innovators, policymakers, citizens? Which better protects the communities who depend on the roads we build? Which better aligns with the scientific evidence? There is no escape from the awkward conversations that reflect the unpalatable consequences, but escape this predicament we must. And what we will see is that fundamentally this is not a technical or engineering challenge, but a very human one one of how we value resilience and the impacts felt by all in society, in pounds sterling, the health of people and our environment, and ultimately in lives. Later, my colleagues will set out arguments that support this motion, but before we enter the technical debate about resilience standards, life cycle economics, and risk modelling, let's be absolutely clear about the world we are operating in. In proposing this motion, we are asking the House to recognise a simple truth. We have a climate that is changing faster than predicted. We have infrastructure that is ageing under stresses it was never built to withstand. We have communities who depend on us to make the right decisions, not the comfortable ones, nor potentially, in the first instance, the cheapest ones, but the responsible ones that will ultimately be felt by generations to come. We will show you why this isn't something that we should afford to do, but simply something we cannot afford not to, by any measure of value put forward. And so the real question is this: do we want roads that cope only with the fair, temperate weather, some still believe to be normal, or roads that hold strong when we need them most? Because it's not on sunny days that our infrastructure proves its worth, but during these extreme moments when the line between human survival and the unthinkable alternative is thinnest. It is in the storm, the heat wave, the flood, that society will really feel the consequences of our decisions today, the moments that test the resilience of each and every one of us and of society itself. This is the world we already live in, and the future we must therefore design for. And that is why this motion deserves your full and serious attention. Thank you.
Thanks, Oliver, for your speech. Joining us as the first speaker from the opposing team is John Armitage. John is a technical director in Ramboll's civil structure team and has delivered many large highway and bridge schemes, including Queen's Ferry Crossing landslide works and HS2 enabling works. He has also developed modular bridge systems with Elaine O'Rourke, which have been implemented on a number of projects throughout the UK. He leads Ramboll's input in the future roads and the 5B3 programs at the University of Cambridge. John, you have the ears of the House.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the other speakers. It's good to know we have teenage daughters in common. The reason for you today to oppose this motion is very simple. We need to be realistic and work within the constraints that we have. The proposition is asking for you today to vote for significant intervention to upgrade the network. The question is, what do we actually do? Should we do that? And as engineers, this is a process that we're used to having to work within, living within constraints. Life is constrained, isn't it? In fact, there's a strong argument here that climate change has actually been caused by overdevelopment. We're building all over the country, and that has contributed to climate change, both from materials and from the interventions. Should we really continue to live in this unconstrained manner? So what I like to do is take from my engineering experience, take a little tangible example. I've been involved in specification of wind barriers on major bridge crossings in the UK. A few years ago, I had the privilege of writing the technical requirements for the Mersey Gateway Bridge up near Liverpool. And the big question there is, what wind speed do we design the barriers for? Should it be that you can get over in any wind possible, or should it be a bit less? And in the end, it comes down to the fact that you have to be able to get to the bridge in a lorry, but to get over it. We shouldn't be designing the bridges for the biggest wind barriers possible. It's not economic to do so. And we all know that there are wind speeds when you shouldn't be driving vulnerable vehicles. It's not a very clever thing to do, to be driving in enormous winds. So should we be putting wind barriers along all our roads to make us able to drive lorries in any weather? I don't think so. So at the end of the day, we're going to have to choose, aren't we? Which events are we going to design against? Which locations are we going to design for? And we're going to have to take some risk in the items that we prioritise. And some of this just comes down to basic maintenance and prioritisation. As a bridge engineer, I'd argue that money we spend on scour protection is well spent, but it's for the everyday case. We design piles down deep, and we can cater for a little bit of scour around the piles. We're in a different world to what we were 200 years ago when everything was on spread foundations. We can protect against these things. And that's well spent. And similarly, we can't keep all our roads safe from flooding. We've got to prioritise which ones we do, which ones are the ones we use. And we need to recognise also, don't we, that the constraints, when we work within them, or if we don't work within them, it could actually worsen climate change. The extra resources needed for full resilience of infrastructure would be immense. You've got extra concrete, extra steel, increased foundation depths on our roads. And all of this comes with a carbon cost. We really need to find a sensible balance on these things. So my view is that as engineers, we need to provide a case for a softer engineering. It facilitates everyday use, it generates economic growth, and it provides connectivity for families. But such a soft engineering comes from understanding that we need to work with nature and not conquer the extreme climate events. And we need to acknowledge publicly that there may be times where we cannot just drive, that maybe our parcel delivery should be delayed a little bit, and maybe we should be a little bit more patient. And I'll just touch on another example, which is, apologies here, I'm going to stretch the motion a little bit because it talks about extreme climate events. But one of the countries I've loved visiting over the years has been Iceland. And they have other extreme events that actually, the question is, do you design for them or not? And there's some amazing videos where the lava has spilt out over the road from the Grindavik eruptions. And they don't bother protecting against the eruption, the fact it's blocked the road. Amazingly, they go back in a week later and you can see videos of them building a road over the top of the lava while it's still steaming. Similarly, you've got huge, great floodplains there where you don't know where the flood's going to come out from the glacier in the event of an eruption. They're pragmatic in what they do. They build in the best location, but they can't protect against everything. And that actually touches onto something that was picked up by the proposing team. The climate is not predictable in the same way that a volcanic eruption is not predictable. Where do you spend your money? We've got to be pragmatic. We've got to work within our constraints. So, to finish up, we need to think about the constraints that are in place around what we do. We actually have finite engineering design resources, finite construction resources, and a finite availability of money. We're all aware of that. And actually, for many of these things, actually the limited availability of design and construction resources is actually more serious than the lack of money. The question is, should we be diverting resources from hospitals, schools, and other key public services just so that we can decide to drive in extreme weather conditions? So really tonight, if you believe that we should divert resource from hospitals and schools to make our roads utterly resilient in extreme weather so that you can continue to drive in every weather condition, then I suppose you probably ought to vote in favour of the motion. But if you believe that we need to live within our constraints and be pragmatic about what we do, then I think you probably need to vote against. Thank you.
Thanks so much, John, for your speech. Let's go back to the proposition team. Our second speaker is Dr. Chapa, Hewa Pelendage, a Mary Sklodowska Curie Fellow in the Future Roads program at the Department of Engineering, University of Cambridge. Her research focuses on design robots to better understand human behavior and inform assistive robotics. Beyond research, she is committed to public engagement and to the outreach of fundamental research. She founded the Human in Robotics Cambridge initiative, aiming to foster inclusive communities and create lasting impact across academia and society. Chapa, the floor is yours.
Today, some of us want to believe that designing roads for normal weather is sensible because extremes are rare and expensive to plan for. But the problem is simple. In today's climate, normal weather is no longer normal. What appears to be over-engineering is really basic realism. And we can still work on reversing our actions on climate change that cause a lot of damages around, or we can do software engineering while working on this. So I'll show you why designing for extremes is not only necessary, but the only responsible option based on 3 angles today. I will be focusing on the scale of the risk, economic impact, and the social perspective. So focusing on the scale of the risk, extreme weather is becoming the new normal. Roads designed for average conditions are already obsolete because climate extremes are now frequent and predictable. So let me give you some points regarding this. Climate change is increasing the frequency and intensity of floods, storms, and heat waves. Roads are designed around outdated climate baselines will drive us to disaster. Let me give you some numbers and evidences to support this claim. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change found that heavy rainfall events have increased across most regions across the world since the 1950s. And global weather-related disaster losses now exceeds $300 to $400 billion a year, with infrastructure damage a major cause. And let me give you some recent examples for this. Devon and Somerset floods, a lot of roads submerged. Even when surfaces survive, closures isolate communities and emergency access. And if you recall Dubai flash floods in 2024, modern cities overwhelmed by sudden rainfall, and this is a perfect example for that. And to be on a personal note, damage from Cyclone Ditwa recently in Sri Lanka, where I grew up, estimated at $4.1 billion, largest share of damage, 42% of the damage went on infrastructure, including roads, bridges, and railways. And roads built for normal weather are built for a climate that no longer exists. You might think these are outliers, these events are outliers, and designing for extremes is an overkill. But let me rephrase, they are not rare anymore. And when the tail risk shows up every decade, it's not a tail, it's a new center of gravity. So let me focus on the economic case in this matter. Designing for extremes is cheaper over a road's lifetime. And why this happens? This isn't about spending more, this is about spending once instead of endlessly. So rebuilding after floods or heat waves or any other event creates repeat repair cycles paid by us, the public. And resilient design, for example, better drainage, elevated road beds, heat-resistant asphalt cost more upfront but saves massively later. And the cost of doing nothing is higher, and the bill lands on the public. And let's look at some numbers. According to the World Bank, every $1 invested in resilient infrastructure saves us $4 to $7 in recovery costs. So we can use this for our schools, education, and health. UK road climate damage projected at £1.2 billion per year by the 2050s without any adaptation. And emergency repair costs more than planned upgrades because of several reasons. It could be traffic disruption, rushed construction, or repeated failure. And let's look at the impact. We build the road, taxpayers pay once, and flood damages it, taxpayers pay again, heat wave buckles it, taxpayers pay again, and this repeats forever. The most expensive option over 50 to 100 years. So the real question isn't, can we afford to design for extremes? It's how long can we afford to build the same road? And you might say public budgets are stretched. We can't afford resilient design now. But not adapting is choosing the most expensive policy, just looking at these numbers. And let me look at the safety and social justice in this motion. So normal weather roads cost lives and hurt the poor most, and how? Designing for normal conditions during predictable extremes endangers lives and it deepens inequality. Let me give you some points to prove why. Flooded roads are deadly, and people underestimate water depth and speed. And when roads fail, we have limited access to fire services, evacuations fail, and many other problems follow. And poorer communities will be hit harder by these. It can worsen the quality of infrastructure, it can have less political leverage to demand upgrades. Let us look at some numbers. In the US, more than 50% of flood deaths involve vehicles stuck in flooded roads. And road collapses and closures block emergency services during disasters. And it routinely disrupts our life. We can miss work and school, we lose access to hospitals, and there will be supply chain breakdowns. In a social angle, road closures can discharge people from a lot of similar facilities, and the poor will be the most affected and safety will be compromised. So, infrastructure policy is a social policy. Roads that fail during disasters fail the most vulnerable first. Thank you.
Thanks, Chapa, for your speech. We will now hear from William Waller. William is a senior director at Arcadis and member of the Highways and Aviation Senior Leadership Team. William is a dynamic, collaborative business leader with over 17 years of cross-sector experience in main contracting and consulting environments. A fellow of the RICS and a fellow of the CIHT, William also holds a BSc and completion of executive education programs in the field of leaderships and handling and Vlerick business schools. William, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members of the House. Resilience is not achieved solely through over-engineering designs. Intelligent risk targeting, strong asset management, adaptive design, and whole network thinking, these are the crucial ingredients to driving resilience. A blanket shift to over-engineering for extreme climate events risks unaffordable costs, too much embodied carbon and land take, whilst potentially neglecting wider causes of failure. A smarter approach is proportionate. A smarter approach is location-specific, and it's adaptive, and importantly, it is systems-led. It also recognises seriously competing priorities. For example, the issue of road safety. Tragically, we are not yet at zero harm on the UK's roads. And in 2025, hundreds of people lost their lives. So I put to the House, is this an interventions that span a cross-functional set of actions, not also a key priority that should have the kind of focus and the kind of resources that the proposition's position would require directed at it? But additionally, I put it to the House that actually investing in the basics is crucial. Many failures during extreme weather events are not primarily the result of insufficient design standards. Overcoming maintenance challenges, keeping gullies and culverts clear, and having strong inspection regimes are all where valuable investment can make a difference. Design and engineering, whilst important, alone does not guarantee performance. Best practice operation and maintenance is key and requires a balanced investment approach. And I believe that the proposition's position neglects that. I believe that our desired outcome is resilience for the benefit of end users and society. And I mean network resilience, which is different from asset resilience. Designing assets to withstand an extreme event, whilst noble, does not necessarily ensure that the wider network remains functional. And that is the crucial thing for communities. No, true resilience includes diversionary routes, traffic management systems, real-time monitoring, emergency response capability, digital weather and flood forecasting, and recovery strategies. I put it to the House that the key metric of resilience is not whether an asset is never disrupted, but actually how quickly the system recovers. Additionally, and tackling directly the point the proposition have made around how climate changes, adaptive infrastructure is crucial. And it can be designed to be adaptive over time. Safeguarding space for expansion and upsizing, modular drainage systems, trigger-based intervention plans, and data-driven decision-making are all examples that will allow infrastructure to evolve potentially, rather than what is being proposed, where there'll be hard and significant and complete investment for very uncertain future scenarios. Moreover, returning to my cross-functional priorities point, it's important to recognise that other changes will drive the need for infrastructure to evolve. For example, economic growth and the development of new housing, also critical issues for society. In conclusion, we do not oppose resilience. We oppose the assumption and the assertion that designing every road for extreme climate is the most effective way to achieve it. True resilience is proportionate. It's balanced with cross-functional priorities. It's risk-targeted. It's network-focused. And it's adaptable. I commend this opposing statement to the House. Thank you.
Thanks, William, for your speech. Now I will take a round of floor speeches from the audience. These are 1 to 2 minute speeches or questions in proposition, opposition, or abstention. So, would anyone like to speak in proposition? There is a mic.
Is it on? It sounds like it's on. Hi everyone, Kristen McCaskill. I would just firstly congratulate all the speakers. You made great points on both the sides, and it was really great to hear the point just raised in the opposing team about thinking about recovery and not just the investment up front, as we usually do in engineering. But a reflection, I thought, on relying on that recovery argument and planning for recovery as someone who has worked on a major recovery of roads. It was an earthquake rather than climate, but a lot of things can be translated, is that we don't have standards for recovery. So if we're going to rely on that argument, I would suggest that then we need to fill a big gap there. And from experience of having some colleagues in New Zealand who are trying to convince the government that they need to plan more for recovery, they are having real trouble doing that despite the experiences of major cyclones and earthquakes in the country in the last few years. So yes, to put I guess support to the proposition, which I think that was what was being asked for. I would suggest that currently, because we lack any standards for a recovery process, that at least designing for extreme events and having some standards that we can commit people to, that we are at least having something that we can measure people by rather than kicking the ball down the road, given our general failure to plan for more extreme situations.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak in opposition?
Not so much in opposition, but a point of clarification on the question itself. I think the question is too simplistic. I think there's a difference between designing for catastrophic failure and designing for operational failures. So I think somebody made a point about designing for scour protection. Absolutely, because failure to do that would take the whole bridge out. Designing for embankment failure, which would take the whole road out. Absolutely. But failure for disruption of the surfacing just because it's a bit hot for a few days and the road becomes a little bit uncomfortable is no different to a diesel spillage, which can easily be dealt with by resurfacing a road, which takes a few hours, maybe a day. So I think there is a difference between catastrophic failure design and operational failure design. And I think the House needs to distinguish between the two.
Thank you. And anyone would like to speak on abstention? So if not, so let's continue. Going back to the proposition team, our third speaker is Peck. Professor Dr. Mike Peck is the Director of Innovation at AtkinsRéalis. He leads the development of digital service with a particular focus on next generation technologies, and they are used to help understand the emergent behavior of complex systems. Matt is a visiting professor at University of Birmingham's School of Engineering, where he's advising on the introduction of digital modules to civil, electrical, and mechanical engineering syllabus. He joined AtkinsRéalis in 2018 after spending 20 years developing data intelligence platforms. Matt, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Just remind ourselves of the motion today that the House believes that roads should be designed for extreme climate events and not normal weather. Now, we've heard that network resilience is possibly more important than human lives, which is an interesting starting point. Today, we've made it clear that we think, or what we think as being extreme weather is now an everyday event. I think we live in extraordinary times, and extreme weather is our new normal. We can't ignore the facts around that. In this, we consider extreme to be relating to both the frequency and the impact. Now, we've made the link between climate change and its adverse effects on the national infrastructure. We've cited statistics from the International Panel on Climate Change and the World Bank that make clear that we are now in an age of adaptation, and also the cost to us all if we fail to adapt. Now, to reinforce these points, a few more things to consider. The UK government issued its climate adaptation strategy for transportation in December last year. In this strategy, it makes clear the challenges facing us all. Its opening paragraph says three quite interesting and quite important things. Firstly, we have witnessed an increase in the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events due to climate change. Secondly, our changing climate is adversely impacting UK transport. Increasingly frequent and severe flooding, heat waves, storms, sea level rises are damaging assets, disrupting services and reducing the reliability across our transport modes. And thirdly, these impacts are reducing the wider resilience of our transport system and are no longer rare. They're affecting performance, safety and investment decisions today. So within these comments, there are some quite stark statistics and forgive me, some numbers. The UK Met Office suggests that all of the 10 warmest years in the UK have occurred in the last 25 years. They also suggest that 6 of the 10 wettest years on record have occurred since 1998. Heat waves like that of 2018 are 30 times more likely to occur now than in previous decades, and predictions are that by 2050, heat waves will occur every other year. Now, just as a reminder of 2018 heat wave, this gave us peak temperatures of over 38 degrees, 15 days or more of temperatures over 30 degrees, 6 weeks worth of drought, 863 excess deaths, that's 20 per day, directly attributed to the heat wave, wildfires and crop failure, melting roads in West Yorkshire and in Somerset and buckling train tracks. And all of this from a 1.5 degree rise on average over the last 50 years. Now, the UK Environment Agency projects that in the next 50 years, we're going to see somewhere between 4 and 4.5% increase. Now, we can all do the maths. Science tells us that for every 1 degree of warming, the atmosphere holds 7% more moisture. And for every 1% more moisture, we've got 3% more likelihood of extreme weather events and extreme rain. Again, we can do the maths. More moisture, more rain, more impact on society. Now, moisture alone does not cause our roads to fail or fail earlier. It's a key factor, though, and when combined with other events, and we've heard about extreme heat, in this country we have extreme episodes of freeze-thaw. Whatever those combinations of events are, it accelerates the destabilisation of our roads, our bridges, our tunnels, and it increases the likelihood of failure. Now, let's think about the cost of doing nothing. Now, what we've heard so far is over-engineering drives unaffordable cost. We need to live within constraints. We need to design for the everyday case because we've got finite resources. And I think arguments along those lines, or even that the cost of change is prohibitive because our public finances are in such a tricky state, suggests that meaningful intervention is beyond our reach. Whilst this may be true, I think in times of great need, we need and we must find a way. Whether or not this is through driving efficiencies or economies, or through any other means, the time upon us is now to adapt. We can't not act. Now, UK government figures suggest that flood-related events alone cost the UK economy £2.5 billion per year, rising, in their view, £2.5 to £3.5 billion per year within the next 20 to 30 years. These costs include loss of production and own post-flood recovery. Now, arguably, this money should be spent elsewhere. Now, if we look at the cost of change, I would much rather spend early and recover money over the long life cycle of an asset than just push the problem down the road and react in time. Let's also be clear that transportation is part of our critical national infrastructure. It's infrastructure that's critical to our nation. If we allow it to fail through lack of action, we'll have been negligent and reckless, and history will not look kindly upon us. It's incumbent upon us now to act for the sake of our children and grandchildren and those that follow. I suppose, do we need to follow the example of the Welsh Government who, through their Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, have placed a legal responsibility on themselves to act in the best interests of those that follow them? Some governments have started to look at the contribution of transport infrastructure in terms of what it means to society. For example, a road is no longer a road, it's a lifeline service. It enables people to travel, emergency services to get to where they need to be, and it drives economic activity and growth. Are we now in an age where the absence of infrastructure may well be measured in terms of lives lost, because the fire brigade could not get to a house fire, or because the ambulance could not get to hospital on time? I don't know about you, but I don't want it to be my family member that's in that ambulance. So, nature-based solutions. We often look to nature to help us. I don't think we can rely on nature to dig us out of the hole that we've dug for ourselves here. let's consider the biggest heat sink that society tends to look into, our oceans and our seas. Throughout human history, we looked to the oceans to save us. Our oceans are able to absorb 90% plus, if you believe some figures, of the heat generated purely by human activity, but this comes at a cost. On a very practical and physical level, warming oceans cause sea levels to rise, and average global sea levels rose in the last century by 20 centimetres, putting at risk many coastal communities around the globe. The oceans themselves have a finite capacity to absorb heat. As they store, they warm, further feeding global warming, with warmer upper oceanic layers evaporating more, adding more moisture. 1 minute? Time. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Moving to our final speaker of this evening, Campion. Paul has been the CEO of TRL since July 2019. TRL is a world-renowned research consultancy and software company which started life as the UK government's transport research laboratory and has been working to make transport safer, cleaner and better for over 90 years. Previously, Paul was the CEO of the Transport Systems Catapult, a not-for-profit organization created by the government as part of the Catapult network to grow the UK economy by supporting the growth of innovation in transportation systems. Paul's earlier career was spent in a widely variety of roles at IBM, helping companies and industries to transform through the application of new technology. He has done professional management and executive jobs in the UK, Europe, and worldwide level, in the UK, USA, France, and Switzerland. Paul, you have the ears of the house.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Madam Secretary, and the entire House. The proposers have made some really fantastic points. They've said that when a road breaks, everything breaks, because roads are a fundamental part of the network of infrastructure that supports our society. They've said that we need to take climate change seriously. Actually, they've gone further than that. They've said that extreme weather is now normal weather, so I'm not quite sure how they even argue for their own point, but leave that aside. They're saying that we've got to do something about transport equity. Couldn't agree more. Fundamental point. And so we've got to ask ourselves, if it's as serious as this, and we certainly believe it is, if climate change is endangering the fundamental way that our society works, is a simple design change really a serious response? No, 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 no. It's much more important than that. The idea that we can just fix this by changing our road design is ludicrous, isn't it? We touch about 1% of our roads in this country every year. There's 250,000 miles of them. We probably touch 2,500. So we're going to spend 100 years to roll out our design changes? Not serious. We've made a few other points. We've suggested that we do have constraints. It's not money. The pandemic proved that if we need to spend money, we can spend money. But how many civil engineers do we have? How many trained technicians are there? How much equipment is there? These constraints are the real constraints, and there are choices to be made. Because climate change doesn't just impact our road network. It impacts all sorts of parts of our, and as we were hearing only this afternoon, the energy system goes, the roads are useless anyway. So we need a proper response. Look, this really comes down to whether you want to respond emotionally to the climate crisis or you want to respond rationally to the climate crisis. If you think we can make some simple engineering changes, fix the roads, everything's going to be fine, by all means go through the yes door. It would be emotionally very reassuring to believe that something as simple as that could fix the mess we've got ourselves into. But I'm sorry, we're here to tell you that's not true. So Will listed some of the other things we could do. And we've also heard about some of the other ways that we can respond. My assertion is not that we need to do one thing, but that we need to do everything. And much harder and faster than we've ever done it before. And if you think that that is a rational response to the problems we've got, then you have to go through the no door. Once again, thank you to the proposers for laying out the problem so clearly. But the solution is on this side of the house. Please, the no door. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Paul, for your speech. In this house, as I said before, we vote with our feet. So please walk through the eyes door or the nose door or through the middle door to abstain. As a reminder, the motion we have debated is future roads. This house believes roads should be designed for extreme climate events, not normal weather. A bell will be rung in 10 minutes or so, and we will ask everyone to return to the chamber so that we can announce the winning team. Thank you, everyone. We cannot walk. We cannot walk.
The 10 or so minutes on my do you choose the best speaker? Is it Yanis or is it?
No, we don't. We don't.
Because I recall last.
Sorry that I didn't answer. We are in the debate room and I'm sharing welcome back. So we have the results. We have 13 in the eyes door, 30 in the nose door, and 1 in the abstain door. So congratulations, you won. Yanis is going to give you some gifts to the winning team. And the best speaker was Paul. Congratulations. There is a... and a special mention to Chapa as a very good speaker too. Congratulations. Thank you, everyone. And
this concludes the debate. I hope you enjoyed it. May I ask the teams to come in maybe for pictures before we go?